Most we do. I think everyone in the room does. Here with Big Yellow Fishes. Big Yellow Fishes. I don't know the proper. I don't know if that's proper, like plural or grammar, but I like
it.
The way it rolls.
Yeah.
So Big Yellow Fishes.
So Big Yellow Fishes means multiple different types of fish. So originally we were Big Yellow Fish, and then we rebranded into Big Yellow Fishes because we probably about 4 years ago we lost the domain for Big Yellow Fish, didn't we? So we then changed. Yeah. And that's how we roll.
Yo, so I came to know y'all through the WIP meetup by proxy of Paradox, who had you guys come in. I don't even know when it first happened, probably over a year ago or so at least. To Paradox makes video mashups of our weekly events, and every now and again has real life things going on, and hits up Big Yellow Fish, and they slide in like Paradox was never there in the first place, and crank out some incredible video edits for us. Got in the mix of Monaverse here, and have been doing some things with them. And here today to talk about Mona Shorts Fest workshop type of stuff with some expert Metaverse videographers like yourselves. So if it's cool with y'all, Ty, are we ready to sort of dive in here, or good enough to be ready?
Yep, it's just audio, so have at it.
Cool. If it gets choppy, if anyone in the audience says it gets choppy, let us know. We can turn the stream off. So was hoping if y'all could just take a minute and introduce yourselves. I sort of did like an impromptu intro, but tell us who Big Yellow Fishes are and why y'all are here with us today.
Yeah, Tom, do you want to go or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. So Big Yellow Fishes started in around 2021, I would say. We joined we were really bored one evening and scrolling through the Steam homepage, and we were looking at the free games to play, and we came across Somnium Space. We joined, and we were amazed at the fact that like it was the first time we'd ever been in the metaverse, so to speak. And we were essentially asked to film a couple events for those guys. And then we did that, and we thought, well, maybe we could make a thing of this. So then we went away and got our degrees and stuff like that, and started our jobs, all the boring life admin stuff. And then at the beginning of
It was 2021.
Yeah. Okay.
It was,
yeah.
Somnium was 2018, I think. So it was before metaverses were a thing. Really, before they were popular.
Then we decided to give it a go and actually make it a real business. So we started off just doing media services. So as you mentioned, Rizzle, filming events for people and kind of going from there. But then we thought, well, my background's in marketing and stuff like that, so we might as well throw that into the mix as well. And then just recently we have kind of switched things up a little bit, and we're now the biggest portion of our company is a subscription model. And we kind of go from there, and that's the big portion of what we do now. But yeah, so we've discovered Mona. I don't know. When do you think, Matt? Pretty much the start, right?
Yeah, it was on launch basically. Yeah.
Yeah, we really like what those guys are doing, so we've kept in contact with their team. Obviously, we're friends with Paradox, and we often keep in touch with what he's up to. And yeah, so we discovered the Shorts Fest, and we were like, oh, we'd love to be involved, and kind of went from there. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind of a couple of years, but here we are.
So this specific workshop is centered around video montages in the metaverse. And I'm about to learn something here with y'all, because I've hung out with Paradox enough and with y'all enough to know what a great video looks like, and I know what a montage is, but in terms of actually creating one, honestly, genuinely curious, as someone who's like been a fan of your work for a long time, to know a little bit about the back end process when you're like, taking, for example, an event or something like that, and you're trying to cut it up into a montage. What is the strategy, or what do you look for when you're trying to create a nice video montage, specifically in the metaverse?
So we really start with kind of a story. So it might be a particular event. So recently, with you guys at the Whip, we did the Mesh Art Showcase. So we started with thinking about how we'd want to portray that, and it was very much classical feeling within the metaverse. So I started with some more classical style music, and then went through kind of uh, when you're doing a montage, you tend to do kind of like a linear timeline. So you're thinking about where you're starting and where you're finishing, but that might be within different time periods. So you're trying to jump throughout the night in a way that within a minute, it feels like you've been to the whole event. So it's really trying to tell the whole story of an event, or the whole story of Captain Scott, whatever we called the character when we did the little short montage for this, through a period of a short time, to allow for everyone to get as much information as possible about that character, feel like they've been involved and that they're involved in that event without necessarily having to attend. And I think that's the really good thing about Montage is it makes people feel more included in the world.
Yeah, I just dropped a link if people are in the chat on the side of the stage to one of the mashups you made from one of the recent whips where we were in Coldie's spot in Monaverse and everything. And I feel like, I mean, you guys always do such a great job of it. But that's a great example of, this was an hour-long event full of like different sort of key aspects, and y'all did a really great job of like sort of capturing each one of like some of the real highlight things and cool things, and like sort of stitching them together in a way that we've got a lot of people who it's a weekly event, so they can't make it one week but wonder what they missed. And it's a nice concise like wrap up of if you weren't there, you got a nice taste of what you were missing. I'm like reading off a questionnaire here specific to montages, so I'm sort of like loosely reiterating some of these. So specific techniques that you use during the making of this workshop, and I assume that's like related to like actual film techniques in world, and I'm sure that is very specific from platform to platform depending on like what features are available and easily utilized. So I know you were just in the Coldie spot. Maybe for the purposes of this montage, since it's for Mona Shorts Festival, like specifically with Monaverse parcels, are there any like tips, tricks, things that you feel like really help you produce good content when you're in Monaverse?
Yeah, so in terms of Monaverse spaces, and to be honest, Metaverse in general, the big thing is if controllers don't work properly, then you need to do really static shots. And then in post-production, so when you're editing, then add your motion. The trick me and Tom have is we actually have ultra-wide monitors. So that means you get an extra kind of half a foot either side of your screen. So if you want to add a little bit of fake movement, you can add it. And that kind of really allows for a more dynamic approach to content creation, because when you're creating in like a moment,
can I pause you for a second, man? Because this is very interesting to me personally, actually. So help me understand how the ultra wide monitors gets you more movement.
Okay, so in terms of an ultra wide, you've got like an extra kind of section either side, so you can fill up your whole monitor with that. When you're filming, so a standard film resolution is 1920 by 1080, which is like a standard screen, or if you're 4K, it's double that. So our screen resolutions are like 3000. So it means that essentially we've got that much screen, and we're fitting it into kind of that kind of size. So it means that we can kind of move along the screen and create motion through video editing. And by doing that, it's a really sneaky trick. But you can kind of put your hands away from the screen or from your mouse, and really focus on actually making sure you set up your shot, it's really nice, and then you're actually just putting your hands down and stopping. And you're doing the typical cinematographer rule where you're waiting kind of 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then starting to move again. Because a lot of people that do events and they start doing events really early get really excited about the event, and they're jumping around and they're walking around. And if you do that, you'll find all of your shots aren't usable. So in terms of of when you're doing it, you're actually better just to walk over to an area, frame up a shot, and then take your hands away and just kind of chill for a couple of seconds, enjoy the event a little bit, than you are just kind of running around like you would if you were actually at the event. If that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah, go ahead.
It's also worth noting that with the ultra wide monitor thing, it also allows for you to be sneaky with your shots. So specifically for event filming, but also for short films. If you're filming something and there's something weird going on in the corner of your shot, like when it's events, it's usually somebody lagging out, or when you're filming a film,
Hello,
it might be
how
like
are you? I am under the water. Please help me. Here, too much
weird. Someone bugging out. You can hide. You can move your screen accordingly to hide that person. So, yeah, it's a good way of being sneaky.
Gives you more space to play with.
Yeah.
No, that's very interesting. As someone who's been playing around with like very low effort, like 10, 15-second snippets of just trying to capture something fun from an event, I'm always interested in these little tricks. And I've also noticed, very similar to what you said in terms of just trying to capture some shots from some of the stuff that I do, that sometimes if you just leave the recording going and enjoy the event, very strange, great shots will like manifest themselves like sort of organically, and you can sort of pick and choose from those. I'm basing a lot of like my frame of reference from the whip and some of the montages that you've done, which actually like play nicely with this. So this question is talking about balancing narrative progression and emotional impact within a montage. Again, I would imagine is like very different from thing to thing that you're filming, but I've also noticed that there's been a couple of videos you've released that I know I've commented specifically on the music, like doing a great job of like capturing the mood. And then I think it might have been the Coldy one or one of the recent ones that you did that actually got a bunch of comments when it was posted about like the music, like really like adding some emotion to the thing. So I that was the first thing that I thought of when I was reading this question about balancing narrative progression and trying to create an emotional impact. But I'm sure there's more to it than that in terms of like actually filming instead of just picking a good song. So how do you guys balance that?
Yeah. So we go on, Tom. I'll let you, because you are the musician.
It goes back to the initial question of like story. So what emotive response are we trying to achieve? For example, if it's like a classical world or something that we're filming that's like very maybe true to real life, for example, we'll put classical music over the top because it's a nice relaxing environment. Whereas I know we've done some events where it's like really fast paced, it's almost like a gaming experience, so people are jumping all over the place, so it would make sense to have fast paced music. It's just whatever fits in that regard. So if something's fast paced, you go for fast paced music, and if it is slow, then it'll be slow paced. So it's a pretty simple thing. But yeah, we also play around with sound effects. So you'll see that if we like to use a lot of like fast transitions that are like swirls or zooms or stuff like that. They will always come with a sound effect, because if something happens on screen that is different, for example, or it is a transition and it hasn't got a sound to accompany it, it feels weird and it puts the viewer off. So we always try and
And that's our process really. So how we work is I start with an assemble edit most of the time. Tom will then take over and with his musical ear, he will cut everything to exact beat. I will then come back in after he's done that, and I will then kind of roll it in glitter and make everything look pretty. Kind of color correcting, doing the transitions and everything. And for us, it means that we neither of us get too close to a project. And if we do, the other person then is the person that takes over. Often when you're working on your own, you can get so close to something that it ends up not being very good because of that exact reason. And me and Tom can kind of discuss, well, this doesn't work, or like something we've been working on recently for Me Bits DAO. We've started with some classical music, and then we've added some kind of little fun noises, elephant noises, stuff like that. just to bring a little bit of comedic or comedic nature to it, and it gives depth to the whole kind of video, and people can rewatch it and go, was that an elephant I heard? Oh yeah, it was. And so it kind of adds upon what you're doing.
Yeah, it's again, like Matt goes on to say, like the element of having two people to look over something is, I think, is what has been the success of Big Yellow Fishes, because it just means that we can always add that extra level of quality onto something, whereas sometimes it's not always possible if it's just you on your own. So it's always good to like peer mark each other's work, and yeah, I think that's probably a really good tip for people that are looking to get to submit a film, is that give it to somebody outside of you and get like feedback before submitting.
Yeah, I feel like that cuts across everything, right? Like some constructive feedback from someone with a fresh set of eyeballs on the thing that you've been working on forever can go a long way. I'm going to go rogue a little bit. We got a couple questions from the audience that's been co-signed on a couple times. Z Creative and a few people want to know, any tips or tricks on getting smoother frame rate in heavy mono worlds when recording? And someone was like, maybe you just need to get a better graphics card, which might be the case. However, if there are tricks beyond that, please share.
I think most of the time it is better computers, which is annoying. And Mona is one of the more intensive metaverses anyway. But this year I had to upgrade quite a lot to get to the point where it was better quality. It's the same as sometimes it could be internet connection. So you might not necessarily have the fastest internet in the world, and therefore you're not loading stuff quickly enough. It can also be browsers as well. Like quite often I'll either use Chrome or Brave browser. I wouldn't use any other browser for kind of Mona or Metaverse in general, because they're not really designed for them.
No, awesome. Great advice. A lot of people say Firefox is like well optimized, although I'm not a Firefox user. I generally stick with Brave, and that works pretty well for me personally. So I have like 1,000 tabs open that I don't feel like sticking in another browser. So I'm stuck with it for a minute.
But I would say that if you are like unfortunate and don't have like the kind of PCs that we've got, then it's worth building your film around that. So start with the thing that is throttling you the most. So if you have an idea, go into a world that can cope with what you're trying to do, for example. And that's what we tend to do when we're doing animations. So that's a bit of a side topic, but we will build animations around the assets that we have to hand, just for speed. Or you kind of got to start with, okay, we have these assets, let's make this type of animation. So if you have the world that you're thinking of, then go from there and think about that creatively. It's just a good way. So then you're not going to be throttled. Like, don't be too ambitious if you're struggling. That's what I mean.
Work with what you got. No, I hear that. Technical aspects, editing a montage, pacing, shot selection. I would imagine that there's some like unwritten rules that y'all have in your heads where if you're trying to shoot a 30-second montage, you're not trying to like chop between 20 clips. Is there like a sweet spot in terms of like pacing, editing, shot selection, how many to use, or how do y'all approach that?
It really comes down to the song.
Exactly.
Because
interesting.
So sometimes I will have in mind that the event is a really slow track, and then Tom will come in and he'll go, no, these are I'll cut up like 30 shots, and then he'll be like, no, this is gonna be like 1 second per shot. So I'm there then going back, scraping through shots and trying to find something else. And then other times,
because as a team, our editing style is that we cut to beat. So we explained it a little bit in the video, but essentially, if your song is a 4/4 track, it tends to mean that every fourth beat you would cut the frame, and we cut 2 beat, and that's just something that we like to do. We think it's more professional and more. It's less evasive to the viewer if something's cut on beat. Like, you might not recognize it, but that is just generally how things are done in like the industry. It's like film and TV. It's not how every editor chooses to cut. For example, some editors just like to do it all over the place, but we're very specific with where we cut our things. So that kind of the pace of the video is established by the music track. But in terms of shots, Matt's very particular with how a shot is to look. So he's got an idea in his head of how it wants to be, and then he'll go through. Like, we will tend to record, I'd say, 5 times the amount of footage that we actually need, and then
if not more.
Yeah.
So like a Mona event, for instance, obviously the event's around an hour. I will film for that whole time. And therefore, sometimes if we're both filming, well, there's 2 hours of footage to scan through. Now, because of years of kind of editing, I can really quickly scan through and do what's called in and out and drag it onto the clips. So I can go for an hour's worth of footage in about 5 or 10 minutes. Whereas if you're not trained to do that, then that's going to take you an hour to look through that footage or more.
But it's worth doing it because it's worth getting the right shots. It's just, it's personal preference. But
you'd rather have more than not enough. It's really important.
Can I pop a question in?
Sure.
Absolutely.
What do you look for when you're doing that in and out, skimming through the hour-long recording to know what you need?
Absolutely. So when I'm filming, the first things I'm doing is I'm really thinking about the environment and what I'm trying to tell as a story. So it might be that I have a shot list in my head that I want. So for instance, recently we did in another metaverse called Portals, we filmed a kind of like launch event for Meebits DAO's New World. And it was kind of like a dance floor and had lots of different shops around. So I was getting establishing shots of the different shops. I was getting a really high up shot of the dance floor. So I'm looking for unique shots that really allow for me to kind of create transitions. So at one point, what I'll do is if there's 40 people in the metaverse, I'll make sure, or the metaverse space, I'll make sure that I get every single one of those people, because I don't want to be in a situation where someone's been at an event and they go, oh, well, I wasn't seen in any of those shots at all. It also, in terms of like, for instance, the whip, if everyone sees that, and they all kind of comment, oh yeah, I was there, you can see me here, well, it's more engagement for them as well. So I'll have kind of to rephrase, I'll have in my head a shot list, and it might be I want 20 mid shots of mid to close-up shots of different people within the environment. For the Cody event, well, I wanted to make sure that I really showcase some of his artwork, so I went round and I go for like a swooping shot of each piece of artwork, and then I'll go and I'll kind of get any kind of more unique shots, so people driving around, people. So at the end of the whip, we always do kind of like an end of whip photo. So I'll kind of try and get people to jump or emote or something like that, just to give it a bit more life, rather than everyone just standing there and it being a little bit lifeless. Like we did one a little while ago where everyone died, and it looked so good because everyone did it in unison. And we did it a couple of times, and it just happened the second time was so spot on that everyone did it at the exact same time.
I'm going to try and pull that up. This is actually fascinating to hear how all the Lego pieces are put together. And I guess, I found it. Oh, did I find it? Hang on, I'll grab it in a sec. It's a great mashup worth watching, especially the end. But I would have never personally, and I guess it makes sense the way you've said it, but I would have never thought like the music plays such a crucial element in how the video is chopped up and staggered and everything. And I did not. I'm sort of disappointed myself. I have a percussion background. I'm sort of upset with myself for not noticing that the shots were changing on the beat, but now that's probably something I'll never be able to unsee or unhear again now that you've pointed that out. So very, very interesting. I appreciate that. Are there any, so when you're making these things, are there specific tools, programs that you're like really heavily leaning on for chopping them up, editing, production, or even like I assume the music, most of the music you're using is open source. Like what are the various things you're pulling from to make these mashups?
Yeah, so all of our music, uh, B-roll, transition packs is all from Envato. So it means we pay a subscription and we can get licensed to us. So we've not got to worry about music licensing in that regard. And then in terms of software, we use Premiere Pro as our main video editing thing. We also tend to music edit inside of Premiere Pro. Now, there will be a lot of people that don't like that, but it's just the tools in there are fine to use for what we need, just for the basics to be done. If we ever have to do custom music, I would do it in like Logic or something like that. But that's very rare. It all tends to be stock music, and then we can edit it inside of Premiere. What else? We use Photoshop for a lot of our graphic stuff, and obviously After Effects and stuff like that. Think of any others, Matt?
Yeah, the only other thing we really use is what's called the Maxim suite, and that just kind of brings a quality of footage up to another level. So when you see VHS effects and stuff like that, that's all from the Maxim suite. It's quite a pricey suite, but my job outside the metaverse is I actually teach at kind of college and university level. So as I do that, I get an educator's license. So for us, it's plausible, but Maxim is very, very expensive.
Awesome. Let's see. A couple of these questions on here we've like basically covered with some of the other stuff that we've been talking about. In terms of like general advice, we've got a lot of people in the audience here who are going to submit entries to Mona Shorts Festival or who have entered some of the competitions. Is there any like general advice beyond what we've talked about today that you would give aspiring metaverse filmmakers? Maybe someone new who's like just coming in and trying to get accustomed to the setup here, but has some experience in making these things. What like unique things should people be taking into consideration or looking out for when trying to make something in sort of like a niche space like this? The Web3 metaverse.
It's start making content consistently. Don't be discouraged. Some communities are going to be really harsh to you and not so nice. And even if you, like for us, we've had situations where we've gone to a metaverse and offered them a really good deal in terms of content when we started, and they turned around and said, you're not worth that, or that your work is pretty or cute. We've had from, I won't name the metaverse, but a very big metaverse has called our content cute. And don't be discouraged by that. It's really about showcasing your talent, and the only way you get better is by consistently creating content and not worrying about it necessarily being bad. If you go back and look at our content from 2019 on the early Somnium videos, it's crap. It is really crap. We had situations where our computers used to turn off mid-event. Somnium used to crash, and you've got to get used to that kind of stuff, especially in the metaverse. How often, especially like the whip, your guys' job is to break a metaverse space. You go in and you test it to the best of its ability, and so at some point it is going to crash, and some points you're going to have issues. So just create content, have fun, because that's the most important thing, and then money comes after that. It's only been within the last kind of 6 or 7 months that we've become a really kind of profitable business, and we've had some really quite nice recent things, like Decentraland started following us, Mona follows us, Somnium follows us. So for us, we're starting to get noticed a little bit more, but it just takes time, and it really depends on, especially when you want to earn money through creating content, it really depends on what you're willing to create and kind of how much effort you're willing to put in, because you can spend 20-30 hours creating a video and only get 50 quid for it. So it's also knowing your worth.
Yeah, on that front, I think my two top tips would be, the first one is to embed yourself into this community. So the video editing community is like, we met Paradox pretty quick, and I think we got a lot of good advice from him. There's also some other guys out there that we speak to on a regular occasion. It's just good to sometimes bitch to each other about what's going on in the community,
In the spaces,
yeah, exactly, or to get advice. I don't think it's always helpful. The only other thing is to never undersell yourself. Like, we've done it a couple of times where we've thought, oh, we'll charge less for this job because it's our first job. They might give us more work in the future and stuff like that. And it's just a bad way to operate. It's better to get paid what you're worth from the very start, and to establish that kind of expectation straight away, and to go from there. I think there's an element of people will come into the space and try and, they might charge 20 quid for a video, and you think, well, okay, fine, but like the next time that customer comes to you, they're going to expect that again. So it's easy to drop cost and raise it. Yeah. So it's good just to stay at a level. There's also an element of other video editors within the space. So for example, if we started charging £10 a video and Paradox was charging, what a video is worth, and that's really not fair to him. So as a community, we need to be all within the same level, and I think that's a big thing within the creative industry in general.
Support ourselves. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Support each other.
Yeah, love it. I mean, this is a growing industry of metaverse videography, and probably some of the leaders in it are like all right in this Discord with us right this very second. So totally with that. I have like one more impromptu question for you that I just thought of as we're talking here. But for people who are listening, I did pin that tweet with the death scene at the very end of it on the main stage chat. So after we're done here, it's only a minute long, but it's worth watching their video mashup of that one with Async Art. So with the whip specifically, is my context for knowing you guys for a long time, like you are getting a very like clear, I mean, maybe clear is not the right word, but it's like a specific thing, right? It's like, we have this event and it would be really dope if you could make a killer mashup of it, but the thing is already like contextualized. With the Mona Shorts Festival, it's a little bit different because it's sort of like an open field of like, make a sci-fi montage or something along these lines. So when you're approaching something like that where you don't have specific direction, I guess a two-part question: is that more challenging for you than when you have like an event you got to create something for, or is there some sense of freedom within having that much to play with and you enjoy that kind of thing? But I would imagine it's two different approaches, and I would be curious to hear your take on how you approach something where you have almost unlimited options and you've got to, sort of rein it in.
Yeah. So go on, Tom. I'll let you go.
I'd say it's awful. When you get given an event, it's like cut and paste in terms of what you've got to do. You've got to film the event, you've got to make an epic video. It's simple. When it's the Mona Shorts Fest, and especially if you're a creative person, it's difficult because you've got 1,000 ideas going around in your head of things you can make, and it's just about getting them onto paper or onto your screen or whatever. So it's just a case of coming up with an idea, sticking to it, and going for 100% on that idea and going for it.
And we also contradict that as well, because we started 4 ideas for the Mona Shorts Fest, and we've scrapped all of them so far because they weren't right for what we're doing. We partially want to have a bit of fun, so I don't know if you've seen the montage that we've done for this workshop, but it was kind of like a really funny last human in the world traveling through space kind of thing called Captain Scott. So maybe we'll have a bit of fun and maybe do a short film on that or something like that, because it's come to the point where we started thinking about the project 2 months ago, like everyone else did. And we're now at the point where we're so close to the deadline in a month or so's time, that we want to create something that's fun and that you enjoy. A lot of people need to think like, are you doing it for the money, or are you doing it to be creative and have fun? Because it should always be the case of you're doing it because you love it, and not because you want to make the $3,000 or whatever it is. Because if you've got that motive, then sometimes your film can be a little bit skewed in terms of how you might make it look, because you don't care about the film, you care about the outcome of the money. So you're not thinking about how you can make this a really good piece of art, rather than a product.
Yeah, no, very well said. I'm also guilty of starting like many things at the same time, but no, you got to just choose one path and go forward at some point. We're a little bit over time. I think this is only slated for a half hour, but really appreciate y'all hopping on. Would be happy if people from the audience have any questions and want to hop on the mic.
I have one.
For a few minutes, as long as you have time. Yeah, fellow Rami.
I don't know if you guys answered, but I wanted to know who will be the judge for this week's challenge and what are you looking for in terms of the video. So some people were talking about monologues, some dialogues, some were talking about just music. So, and also Christian talked about A&Bs, anime music videos. So what are you looking for? What do we make? But specifically, this question is specifically to the judges of the videos.
Well, I can give you
Yo, this is Sango, and you're listening to Stay Cool Radio.